Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on the news. We're going to explore all the hidden forces that shape every single headline you read and every story you watch.
It seems like such a simple question, right? But the answer? Well, it reveals this incredibly complex process. It's almost like a factory, one that filters, shapes, and literally constructs the reality that gets delivered to you every single day. And that process? It shapes your entire view of the world.
Okay, let's dive right in. To even get started, we have to challenge a really common, really powerful assumption that pretty much all of us have about what news actually is. Most of us, we tend to think of the news as this perfect mirror of what's happening, a clear window on the world. But the reality, it's not that at all. It's way more like a carefully assembled product, a story that's been built using very specific, very selected pieces of information.
And that's the absolute key right there. News doesn't just happen. Think about it. Out of the millions of things happening across the globe every single second, only a tiny, tiny fraction ever gets selected, built, and then stamped with the label newsworthy. And that selection process, that's exactly what we're going to dig into.
All right, so let's get into our first big clue in this mystery. And trust me, it's a huge one. We're talking about the powerful and often totally invisible influence of money on what you see.
You see, producing real, original, deep-dive journalism, that stuff is incredibly expensive, and it takes a ton of time. In our world of 24/7 news cycles and shrinking newsroom budgets, that's led to the rise of something called churnalism. Basically, it's journalism on an assembly line.
So, just how common is this? Well, get ready for this number because it might actually shock you. We're talking about a massive chunk of the news you see every day.
Yep, a groundbreaking study out of Cardiff University found that a staggering 80% of stories in major UK papers, they weren't original reporting. They were just repackaged material from press agencies, government departments, and corporate PR spin doctors, often with little to no fact-checking. And listen, journalism is just one piece of this economic puzzle. You've also got pressure from big advertisers. I mean, you don't want to bite the hand that feeds you, right? And then there are simple physical limits. A newspaper only has so many pages. A TV broadcast only has so many minutes. All of it shapes what you get to see. Okay, moving on to our next clue. Let's look at how power and politics draw these invisible lines around what can and, more importantly, what can't be reported. These are the rules of the game, both the official ones and the unofficial ones.
Now, sometimes this influence is super direct, really obvious, like state censorship, where a government just flat out bans reporting on something. But a lot of the time, especially in democracies, it's way more subtle. It comes through laws that restrict access to information, like the UK's Official Secrets Act, for example.
And then, on top of all that, you have the constant threat of being sued for libel. The fear of getting hit with a massive, expensive lawsuit. That creates these really powerful legal guardrails for every newsroom. Honestly, that fear can be just as effective as any government censor at killing a story before it even gets off the ground. So we've looked at the outside forces, the money, the politics, but now we get to the real heart of it. The secret, unwritten code that journalists themselves use to decide what's worth telling you.
And these aren't written down in some rule book. They're not official company policies. They're a set of shared ideas. They're called news values. It's something journalists just kind of absorb on the job, learning from their editors and colleagues what makes a good story.
Think of senior editors as these powerful gatekeepers. Every single potential story that comes into the newsroom gets held up against this checklist of news values. They're the ones who decide what gets through the gate and what gets tossed aside. And just as important, they decide how big a story is going to be, front page or buried on page 20.
So, what's actually in this secret code? What are these values? Well, let's take a look at a few of the big ones. Think of it like a mental checklist that's running at lightning speed in a journalist's head.
Okay, rule number 1, immediacy. First and foremost, news has to be, new. Is it happening right now? Immediacy is king. An event that happened today is almost always seen as more newsworthy than something that happened yesterday, even if yesterday's thing was actually way more important in the long run.
Next up, rule number 2, personalization. We're just wired to be interested in other people. So any story that involves a celebrity or a powerful politician or has that classic human interest angle that pulls at your heartstrings, yeah, that gets pushed right to the front of the line. And rule number 3, novelty. You know the old saying, dog bites man isn't news, but man bites dog, that's news. Anything that's unusual, rare, or just plain weird, that's always going to be considered more newsworthy. Why? Because it breaks the mold of everyday life and grabs our attention.
Okay, last section. So we've kind of cracked the code, right? We've seen the economic pressures, the political rules, and that secret internal checklist. But what does all of this actually mean for you, the person on the other end, scrolling through it all?
Well, first, there's something called agenda setting. By constantly hammering away at certain issues while totally ignoring others, the media literally sets the public agenda. They don't tell you what to think, but they're incredibly powerful at telling you what to think about.
And it gets even deeper. It's not just about what topics they choose, it's about how they frame them. They present a story from a very specific angle that guides you toward a certain interpretation. Think about it. Are those people in the streets protesters or rioters? That one-word choice can change everything.
And this kind of framing, over time, can lead to the creation of what sociologists call folk devils. These are individuals or entire groups who get singled out and blamed for society's problems. This creates a really powerful and often really dangerous us versus them narrative. It simplifies a complex problem into a story with a clear villain.
So, what's the big takeaway here? At the end of the day, the news is not just a simple reflection of what happened. It is a product, one that's carefully constructed and shaped by money, by power, and by that secret code of values we talked about. So the next time you're scrolling through the headlines, remember, you're not just seeing what happened. You're seeing the story that someone somewhere chose to tell you. And now you know the rules of the game.